Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about keeping all your code in the main function. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, a senior software engineer told me to make functions, not to make functions and to have all my code in my main method because it is faster. I argue that this makes the code way too unreadable, redundant, and messy. Who is right? Well, it depends on how much code we're talking about and what you're optimizing for. So this is one of those arguments that will never end, which is that the people who understand the problem will know which way to go here, because there are pros and there are cons with each approach. And simply stating that one is better than the other without stating what the problem is, first and foremost, is ignorant, because then you don't know, then you're just an evangelist, just as the functional programming geeks can't understand under what circumstances functional programming is a bad idea, and for example, when it's better to have a mutatable reference to something rather than always treating everything as immutable, because immutable is always faster, right? Nope. It depends on what you're doing. And so the same thing is true here. The reality is that you can be right and say that it gets really messy, but your coworker can also be right depending on what you're going to do. If you have over-engineered your solution, let's say for the sake of argument that you are making a simple algorithm that's going to sort something or whatever, right? Well, then it might not be necessary for you to make a bunch of methods, because I haven't seen the code. For all I know, what you're doing is like over abstracting. You're taking the idea behind abstraction and so forth to like the realm of the insane, where you try to reduce your main method down to just a few function calls. And so, in an extreme case, I would see in my head, I would see a main method that calls another method, which is that's one of my favorites, right? You have a single reference to this method that does your business logic, right, inside of another method, and it's the only place it's being used. So all you've really done is to move the business logic one level down without any reuse of, you're not reusing, you're not doing anything. You just have a method that calls another method, which, depending on how you look at it, could be an anti-pattern. So if your coworker is simply trying to tell you that, well, it's faster or like it's more performant to not have a bunch of functions, then that would make sense, because you're basically just complicating things, or you're optimizing for the wrong thing. But the argument here is that the person is focusing on speed. And the thing that I'm talking about is more about, there is such a thing as having too little code, or like where you create like abstractions just for the sake of abstractions. And usually when people come with the speed argument, it's because they prefer to have things in a declarative fashion, which is the way that we used to do it before a lot of these more abstraction heavy approaches, and when we started adding more functions into the code. I would say that this might be completely wrong, but I think that the idea of like declarative ways of doing things, it sort of comes from the era of embedded systems development, when you were writing programs that were usually smaller, focused on integration to hardware or memory management or something like that. And the more business logic you added, the faster people started to realize that shit, we have main methods now that are like 1,000 lines of code, and that's going to be very difficult to reason about because there's so much going on. And so we started moving towards a more abstraction heavy thing, and as with all humans, what happens then is that the pendulum swings too much in the other direction. Some people are sane about it and like move the needle a little bit in the right direction, and some people go to the extreme because they have they can't stop themselves. And so if your coworker is doing this exact thing where like they're basically saying that everything is faster if you keep it in the main method, well, technically it's not necessarily faster, it's just less space. Well, it depends on how you want to look at it. But sure, you can argue that that is the case, that it's faster. But at the end of the day, the worst thing that can happen is that if the method grows to such a point where it's actually doing the wrong thing, or you have people who can't effectively work on the code, well, then you can't ship things. So that speed is impacted. Delivery speed gets impacted. Sure, execution speed or memory footprint or whatever you're optimizing for might be better, but the actual delivery speed goes down. And the question is, do you really need everything to just quote-unquote be faster? Why is speed the important part? And is performance such a problem in the scenario that it warrants having everything in the main method? I suspect that that is not the case, because even the most die-hard fanatics of declarative style will tell you that some of the most high-performance systems in the world, and well, quite a lot of people have sort of embraced the idea that good abstractions are necessary to make a system scalable, even though of course it would be faster if we optimize the code for the computer. But it's been proven many times that there is no real reason to do that unless you actually need that benefit. And it's extraordinarily rare that you need to tweak speed to the point where using a function is too heavy. And in many cases, that's just like, it doesn't actually matter once the program is running, depending on the language. In some cases it does. So your coworker is really doing, in my opinion, the same thing that most people who talk about speed are doing. Like he or she read somewhere that this thing makes it faster. It's just a belief. They have no proof. They have no frame of reference. They have no idea what they're actually saying. It's just something that they sprinkle, just as, you know, saying that it's a Christian thing to do, or it's a good thing to do, or something like. It's just a word that they are using without actually thinking about what they're saying. So I would suggest to you that you're going to have to do the thing that always happens in these sorts of scenarios, which is to go into the expert democracy, because your coworker can be completely right, or they can be completely wrong. And what really matters is, are they going to stop you from doing what you want to do? That's it. That's all that really matters. So if you want to do it your way, and you can get away with it, and like make them sort of understand your point, go for it. If you can't, do it their way, and just live with the fact that, with the knowledge that everybody has someone who tells them what to do, and those who don't, well, I don't know anybody who like that. Let me know. Anywho, so what I want you to take away from this is that it is true that code, or like depending on how you want to look at it, that if you just keep all your code in one gigantic super block, it's going to be faster, depending on what you're doing. But it also is a balancing act for most people between, alright, do you want your code to run as fast as humanly possible, or do you want it to be maintainable? Because you can make something that runs as where the speed difference, guys, it's negligible. Like, it's not really, I mean, we're talking about such a minor difference depending on how you write your code, of course. And it's very rare that keeping all your stuff in the main method is a good idea, but there are situations where that is true, just as there are situations where the difference between, I don't know, copying objects to keep them immutable versus doing like mutable references, that there is an actual difference here, which is fairly important, where you will see severe performance differences. But mostly when people talk about speed in this way, it's just like it's a hallelujah type of thing. It's just, yeah, do this thing. I have no idea how it works and why it's a good idea, but I've heard it somewhere, and now I firmly believe that this is the case. But if you ask them about what specifically is going to be faster about it, they won't actually be able to give you the details, and that's when you know you have a religious person on your hands. And people like that can't usually be reasoned with. You just have to bore them to death, which is usually done best by being informed yourself and just asking, but what if we do it this way? Could we talk, like, you basically try to convince them to allow you to do the thing that you want to do. And either they're going to stand their ground or they're going to let you through. And how you win that battle, well, that's a whole different video. Have a great day.